Good evening and welcome everyone to our first event of the 2019 Dialogue Series. I'm very pleased to see so many of you joining us here tonight and many more of you who are joining online as we are recording this and broadcasting live. This year's event speaks to the way in which America's history is created, not through the official narrations, but through the many voices of diverse peoples and communities who make up this nation. The United States is an uncommonly diverse nation. In order to accurately capture that reality, people of different backgrounds must have the opportunity to tell their stories. Frequently, their accounts will refute officials' narrations in many different ways. History is generally told by the victor, not by the vanquished. A major product of our post-colonialism and postmodernism has been the telling of history through other lenses. That is to say, to have a conversation with history through the eyes of those without formal authority. They are often most eloquent witnesses whose narrations reclaim the space in which oftentimes they have been removed. And they do that with dignity and to ensure that all voices are being heard. So that is this year's theme for our dialogue series, Through a Different Lens, Re-Narrating the Nation. We look at stories of our nation through the eyes of Americans who are marginalized by race, gender, immigration, or poverty, and sometimes many factors that intersect around these issues. Through their voices, we can see specific eras in a new light. The Civil Rights era, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and the exclusion of women from the political sphere in many distinctive phases. In all of these narrations, there's new knowledge, unheard voices, and many times heroism that preceded social change. Now, I am particularly honored tonight to welcome our first guest to the series, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. He is a veteran of the Civil Rights Movement and a tireless advocate for closing the achievement gap. I'm going to let Vice President and Provost of this campus here in Germantown, Dr. Margaret Latimer, introduce him formally. But let me add that Margaret is a STEM major herself, and hopefully you will know her to be a persistent and vigorous advocate for all things STEM and an innovator in a lot of ways at this college. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Dr. Pollard. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Freeman Hrabowski III, the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. If you've read the book, you know that there is significance to being the third Freeman. If you haven't read the book, I encourage you to do so. I won't spoil that story. No spoilers here. Dr. Hrabowski was a pioneer, as Dr. Pollard said, in the early civil rights movement, including the Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama, which proved to be a critical piece in the civil rights activism in the southern United States. As a boy of only 12, he was among a group of children who were jailed for 5 days after a historic march on City Hall in 1963. Enduring the threats and violence of the movement, including the tragic bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, in which a schoolmate of his died, Dr. Hrabowski recalls in his book that his community never let him play the victim in the face of racial oppression, but insisted that he work twice as hard to achieve. These lessons clearly paid off as he earned a master's degree in mathematics and a doctorate in higher education, administration, and statistics. Dr. Hrabowski is well known as an innovator in higher education with a focus on closing the achievement gap. Since 1992, he has served as president of UMBC, where he co-founded the Meyerhoff Scholars Program. The program is one of the most successful programs for educating African Americans who go on to earn STEM doctorates. Dr. Hrabowski chaired President Obama's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans, as well as the National Academy's committee that produced the 2011 report, Expanding Underrepresented Minority Participation, America's Science and Technology Talent at the Crossroads. Dr. Hrabowski was named one of the 10 best college presidents by Time magazine and has received some of the nation's highest accolades in higher ed leadership, including honorary degrees from more than 40 institutions. He is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the American Philosophical Society. If I were to cite all of the awards that Dr. Hrabowski has received, you would hear only from me this evening. There would be no time remaining for the man we all came to hear. Dr. Hrabowski, we are thrilled to welcome you.
Thank you very
An
much.
honor
Thank
having you.
So clearly you are in a space where you are welcomed, and you have several fans that are here. Out of curiosity, how many of you are UMBC grads? Go ahead and get that out the way. All right. And I know we have some students here who want to go to UMBC, so I am delighted to welcome each and every one of you. One of the things that I know about you, Freeman, is that you talk a lot about the support that you receive from your family, and the idea about how community has been so powerful in helping to produce the man that you are right now. A man who was, as a child, arrested at 12 and jailed. And I think a lot about this idea of how important families and communities are, and perhaps maybe even the idea that we don't have as strong family structures oftentimes in communities as we used to. Could you talk a little bit about how you arrived to be in jail at 12, and then how that family support and community support either put you in that spot or helped you get out of that spot?
Sure, I'm delighted to do that. I'm delighted to be here. You are one of our leading feeder institutions. But first, I'd like us to give a round of applause to one of America's best college presidents. And in the sense of context that we are not new friends, the fact is that I met her years and years ago when she was in Chicago, and she was leading a program. She was an English professor and other things, and she was so impressive that I said to her then, "You're gonna be a college president." I'll never forget that. So give me credit for knowing she's gonna be a college president.
All about you.
Now, to answer your question, I was very blessed, and I've told this story so many times. I am a deep Southerner. I say that the Baltimore area, Baltimore-Washington area, is the South, but it's the upper South. Mm-hmm. You know that, right? One day we think like Philadelphia, the next day we think like Richmond. It depends on the issue. Mm-hmm. But I am from the deep South, and in the deep South we love stories, and the story I tell is I'm sitting in the back of church one middle of the weekday, and the gentleman at the lectern, the minister said to the group, if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our babies, our kids, know the difference between right and wrong, and they will be able to go to better schools. And I didn't want to be there anyway. I'm sitting in the back being placated by the two things I loved most, math and food, and I'm eating M&Ms, the good kind with the peanuts, doing my little algebra, and I look up and I hear him say we could go to better schools. We had some wonderful teachers, wonderful African-American teachers without the resources, and with hand-me-down books. We only could use the books that were used after they had been completed by the white kids, and they put brown paper bags around. We hated that. And my parents couldn't buy my books because then I'd be different. So imagine the psychological impact on children who were being told every day in our country, you aren't good enough to have your own book. You'll get the white kids' book. So I knew I wanted to go to a place where I could get the new books, right? And I did go home. My parents said, absolutely not. You cannot much. And I looked at them and I said, you made me go. I didn't want to go. You told me to listen. I kind of listened to him. His name, of course, was Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'll never forget, I said, you know, you guys are hypocrites. Now, at that time, you didn't tell your parents they were hypocrites. So what does my dad say? Of course, go to your room, boy. And I'm scared. The next morning he comes in. They'd been up all night praying, and literally you could see the tears. And they said, it wasn't that we didn't trust you. We did not trust the people who would be over you, because if you march, you're going to jail. And they said, but we've thought about it. We've prayed over it. We will put you in God's hands. And so I did go. It was a horrific week. We were treated like animals. But it did empower us to know what our parents had said, no time to be a victim. They treated us like animals, but we knew we were children of God. And there was a power in that sense of self that our parents had given us, and that's the story.
That idea of victimhood and victimology actually is the next question. You were taught to refuse to think of yourself
Yes.
as a victim,
Yes.
even in segregated Alabama.
Yeah.
And what I think is even provocative about that, when you think about how African Americans were being treated then, and the context in which they were surviving and living, how did you still maintain that belief and that mindset of not becoming a victim? Because I think there's an opportunity to transfer that into contemporary society.
Yes,
But fire hoses, dogs,
Yep.
beatings,
Yes.
incarceration unjustly. When you talked about the wrapping the textbooks in the brown paper bag, I think about how I had to do that in Chicago,
Wow.
right? You know, you think about that. But how do you then not adopt an attitude of victimology?
Yeah, it's about building community. Now, we were very fortunate, and I always say, among children of color, we were the most privileged in the Deep South because we were in middle-class Black Birmingham. So our parents, for the most part, at least one would have a college degree at a time when only 10% of Americans had a college degree and 2 to 3% of blacks. But our parents were the teachers. And then one doctor here, one lawyer here, or they were the help for the richest whites, who were also a part of black middle, you see, because the help for the richest whites would go to Europe with their white employees, so they were also quite sophisticated. So all of that's black middle class. So I grew up with Condi Rice around the corner, whose dad was my high school counselor, with Angela Davis. Some of you old enough remember the big afro, right? Angela's mama taught me, my mother taught all of them. You know, so we were the most privileged of kids, and at the same time, we had some parents who were rebels. My mother was fired in 1948 for leading the equalization of teacher salaries protests in the county outside of Birmingham. She had the biggest mouth of all and just was courageous because black teachers received about 2/3 of the salary of a white teacher for the same amount of money. And she said it wasn't fair. So she was always proud of that and was always giving me that saying, you must stand up for justice. She didn't want me to go to jail, but you must stand up for justice because I was a kid, right? And so what did we learn from all of that? We learned the value of community. We learned the value of faith. Of all the things I can tell you, because every child won't have a mama who's a teacher. We know that. But of all the things, and anybody in this room will appreciate this, it was getting that sense of love in the home, that unconditional love, number one. It was the faith that we had. But number three, as a mathematician, it was reading. It was books. My mom was an English teacher.
Yes.
She'd punish me using characters from Native Son or from Crime and Punishment. She'd call me Raskolnikov when I was being arrogant. And the other kids, what is she talking about? And I'd be embarrassed because I knew. Or she'd call me Bigger, if you remember, right? You know, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, you know. And so, but books. In all of our homes, we had two. We had the faith, we had the Bible, but we had books. You know, so when I'm talking to children in the Baltimore area and with parents and families and mothers and grandmothers, I wanted that boy, that girl to read. Because once a child can read, you can never take it from her. That's the issue we face in America.
So you sent me a couple books over the years, and you know that I have the most glorious thing in my life is my 12-year-old son. And I get to parent this little boy who is tall, dark, and handsome.
Yes.
And everyone sees him, they immediately think he's going to be a basketball player. And they talk to him about, you know, what team you're doing, and we can have great conversations about that. But I also tell them he's in advanced math.
Yes.
He's also in advanced science right now. He can read at a grade level far above where he is. But that's not the narrative.
Yes.
It's not the narrative. And in your book, you talk about this idea of what we teach black children, oftentimes, particularly black men and boys and men, about what their future can be and what it is. How do we start to undo that? And because that idea of reading, that idea of being able to understand that you can be an athlete, but you also can be a bioscientist, you can be a geneticist. You should be thinking about how to create the next cure for HIV that you have on the front of this book. Those are the things we want to be talking about, but that's not the dominant narrative when it comes to talking to black boys about their future. How do we start to undo that?
You know, I must start by saying, some of you who know my campus know we are a very nerdy place. We take great pride in that. So while we did inspire UVA to do so well this past year, I must say, we were delighted to inspire them with their wonderful $9 billion. The fact is that normally, before we won that game 2 years ago, my line was, my basketball team can read really well. And we showed they could read and they could play ball, right?
That's right.
And the best line of that night was when somebody asked one of the kids what he was going to do later. He said, I've got to go back to my room and study for a test.
Yes.
And we loved it, right? Because
Yes.
it should be balanced. We need, the athletics can be important. Yes, they can help us. They can help with the sense of self. But we must teach our children they can do more than play ball. Give me a round of applause for that, please.
Yes.
But it's not just playing ball. But, you know, we got respectable athletics on my campus, but they are good students. Life of the mind is what's important. And we need to show children examples. I can think of young black males from this county who are now on the faculty at Duke with tenure in medicine and neuroscience. You get my point? Who were athletes.
Yes.
All right, but who are doing other things. We must tell that narrative. We always get the bad news travels really fast.
Yes.
If somebody kills somebody, everybody talks
Everybody
about
know.
it. Person gets an MD, PhD, and you never hear about it. So we must tell the narrative every time we can see success. And what we do at UMBC that I think is really important is to take young people who are 19 and have them help kids who are 14, and have the 14-year help somebody who's 8. So we have programs for that, you know, because an 8-year-old will listen to a 14-year-old before they will to me. And a 14-year-old will listen to that 19-year-old. We need many examples of Montgomery College, UMBC, working with high schools, working with middle schools and elementary to say, yeah, I can be cool, I can play ball, and I can read, and I like to think, and I like mathematics.
Right.
You know, you got to have that narrative there. I go back to one point. If you give me a child who can read, I can teach her to solve word problems. Think about that,
Yes,
right? If you
yes.
get that child who can read, and attitude is everything. You've read Carol Dweck about mindset. Watch this. How many of you in this room knew by the time you were in the 11th grade that you were either a math science type or you are history, English, and arts type? Raise your hand and look around the room. This is what we give people that message all the time. And what I'm wanting people to understand is you can do either. You can do either, and that's for our children, for ourselves, and even when you say, well, I wasn't good in math, well, yet. I'm always saying that to American mothers. Don't tell your daughter you weren't good in math, because then when she has a problem, she's going to say, I'm like my mother. Just say I haven't got good at it yet, but I'm ready to learn, right? Because you can still learn it. Right? And so the same thing is true with our kids, with our black boys, with our girls. Right now, the problem with young women and girls in our country is technology. They're doing better in math and science, but with specificity, in the 80s, we had 36% of the computer science majors who were women. Today, it's down to 18%.
Wow.
That's across races. And we are not appalled. My women who come from other countries, and we have kids from, like you, 100 countries, if they're from Russia or Turkey or Israel, they're far more likely to be equipped to work on the computer science. It's not that our girls can't do it, we have not focused on it. And so, it's with girls, it's in technology that we really have to do more. With boys, it is, and that's for all races, we've got to do much more to get them to be excited about the work itself.
So the thing that I love is that you have this mastery of data, and in your book you actually have share one that's probably quite troubling. In 2010, African Americans earned just 2.2% of doctoral degrees in natural sciences, math, and engineering. While that is up from 1975, where it was 1.2%, it's down from 2.9% in 2000.
That's right.
Do you have any thoughts about these
Sure.
fluctuations?
You know, and you will appreciate this in Montgomery County, one of the wealthiest jurisdictions in the country, one of the best educated, one of the most enlightened. All the national agencies are here for NIH, other than NIHS down in North Carolina. There is, as a result of chairing the Obama Commission on Education for African Americans, I got all the data in America. I could not find one national agency where even 1% of the scientists are black. Not even one, not even the Health Disparities Institute.
Wow.
Where you're talking about blacks and Latinos, right? Latino numbers, 2 to 3%. So my house take great pride in producing African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and whites too, who are interested in the underrepresentation issue, but it is a major challenge in our country. Now those agencies are working on it, but we have to tell the truth about where we are with the data. You know, and you cannot solve a problem if you don't state it. And then you have to work with specificity. I would argue that to increase the numbers in these disciplines, we have to bring the rigor of analysis. This isn't about touchy-feely. This is about rigor of analysis. What my campus has been able to do is to change the culture of science. You know, my TED Talk says the culture of science is such that the majority of kids of all races get wiped out of science or engineering in the first year. We call the first year of STEM weed out courses. And usually we think, well, it's just because the student didn't prepare. But what I learned from the National Academies Committee that I chaired was this: the higher the test scores, AP, SAT, of the student, the more socially prestigious the university, listen carefully, the greater the probability the student with that near perfect math score will leave science in the first year or two. I mean, invariably. So that it didn't surprise us that only 20% of blacks and Latinos who start in science will succeed in science. Only 32% of whites, and I mean the best prepared whites, okay? Only 41% of Asians. Native Americans way down below any of those. And so what is the result? Only 5% of the degrees in our country at any given point, 25-year-olds will be in STEM. In Europe, it's 11%, and India is literally creating hundreds of additional STEM universities. While when we look at the hacking issues in Russia, and when we see that Russia and China, the countries where we have some challenges, are far more enlightened when it comes to helping women in computing than America. That doesn't even sound possible. But I'm telling you, a young girl is more likely in those societies to become an expert in computing than in America. That we have to talk about what that means in terms of values and what we have to do for expectations. So my TED Talk talks about clear expectations and high ones, not just for the students, but for us as a society, for the professors. If I go to the board in mathematics and I put up a problem in differential equations and everybody says, oh, he was so eloquent, and then I give you a test on it, and most of you fail it, have I taught it? And there's our issue. We tend to think if you put it on the board, it's now your responsibility. Now that's across America right now, in STEM. I mean, in my grad work, and I've got fellow alumni here, wonderful university with a lot of Nobel laureates, but in my grad work in abstract algebra, usually I saw the back of the person's head, because they were doing a proof across the board. And when I would, you know, I would want to get them to stop, because I'd gone to my beloved Hampton where they did allow me to ask questions, and I'd be the only little black kid in the room, and I'd say, how'd you go from step 3 to step 8? And the professor looks around at me and goes, isn't it obvious? And I would want to say, sucker, if it was obvious, I wouldn't ask you that question. I didn't. What I did, though, because all the kids, all the men, it was only men in the class, they would smirk. Like, are you really that dumb? Now, I'm the only one there. But I had been taught by my parents and by Hampton, you don't give up. What I did that the other young men did not do, I went to the office. I didn't care if he was annoyed. I would go to the office and smile and say, yeah, it may be obvious to you, it's not to me. You know, and I'm not stupid. Would you please help me? So we got the first midterm back in a topology course, and I'm the nosy little fat kid looking over at everybody's paper, and they got C's, and in grad school, C's are failing, right? And they're all trying to hide it. I'm looking to see what they got. I got an A-. I held my paper, I said, I guess it was obvious. I guess it was obvious. The point that what did I learn from that, as I did when I was in jail, that you don't have time to be that victim. You don't let somebody define who you are. They may look at you as if they think you're ordinary, but you know better. But you must be willing to be humble enough to say, I need your help. You're the professor, right? I need your help, right? And eventually, students get that point. Eventually, and so attitudes of our students, but attitudes of our professors around the country, and that's the point.
So you talk a lot about using data to assess institutions.
Yes.
Have you seen that truly then change an institution once they start to use that data? I say that for us, we have a student success scorecard that we've put in about 5 years ago, and we're disaggregating data across disciplines, across gender, across race, and we're starting to have, I think, some substantive conversations, particularly around where we see significant gaps still occurring. How have you seen, or maybe within your own organization, how have you used data to help drive that cultural change?
It's been absolutely critical. We started with those issues with minority students, realized we had issues with students of all races, and this book talks about some of it. The new book comes out in a month with Hopkins Press called The Empowered University, and we focus on this data question. We were able to learn some things from working with those Black and Latino kids that we now use with students of all races, so course redesign, and looking at the performance by section, by faculty member, by course, and creating a kind of culture that does not point fingers at people. The idea is not to embarrass a professor. It is to say, in this section, it looks like these same students randomly selected and put in these classes are doing much better. You can have, and most campuses have never looked at the range of grades for one particular course with every section. And you'll see that range sometimes can go from 20% failing to 60%. With students kind of randomly, right? And what that says is there's a challenge there.
Yes.
Then it's about creating a culture that says this is not about trying to point fingers at you, it's about using the truth and the data to understand why is this the case? What can we learn from each other? How do we give colleagues the professional development support if we need to rethink the course? For us, it's been about course redesign, active learning, the use of technology, real-time evaluation, insisting upon collaboration and working in groups, getting away from the cutthroat approach. One example, in STEM, we often grade on the curve. If you grade on the curve, you are setting up failure for most people. Because I'm not going to tell you what I know because you may not tell me what you know. And it's not about a standard, it's about whether or not you get a higher grade than I do, a higher score than I do, right? So we've had to rethink a lot of that. Are we perfect? No, but we're much better. We can now say we have produced more African Americans who've gone on to complete MD, PhDs at Stanford, Harvard, and wherever, than any university in the history of America. Give us a round of applause for that. And that's our number one data point. And that's with young men and women, but it's not just African Americans, it's Latinos, it's whites, it's Asians, but it's using the data and looking with specificity. You can't just say STEM, because what happens in engineering will be different from computer science, will be different from chemistry or biochemistry or biology, by discipline, right? By level, by race, by gender, disaggregating the data. So use of analytics and data warehousing every step of the way regularly. We look at that every few weeks to see where we are. And the question becomes, what is the probability of a student by race, by gender, by income level of that student who begins with a major in biochemistry actually graduating with a degree in that? I can tell you that your students come to us and do quite well. I can tell you we get 500-600 a year. I can tell you that the graduation rate when they come there with that AA degree, all right?
Yep.
Within a reasonable amount of time, within that 4-year period, will be between 75 and 80%. Give yourselves a round of applause. They do well. They do well, and well over 40% graduate in STEM. Average for the whole system of University of Maryland is is about 20%. You got 40-some% coming to my campus, making it in biochemistry and computer science. Professor Voss told me he was sending me some of his best tonight. I took a video of him. He may not be here, but I took a video of him. Wait a minute. Saying that I'm going to put that all over the place, right?
Yes.
That's what I mean. When you hear a success story, when you have a professor from a community college telling you your students are doing so well, I send you more. You want to replicate that. You want to talk about that. You want to say to families, bring them here, and then let me show you how we can send them to Harvard or Stanford. That's the idea. 40-some% of my science students go immediately to grad and medical school. Of all races, right? And do superbly.
That sounds like that inclusive excellence that you talked about in your book.
Yes.
Those of you who haven't read the book, he talks a lot about inclusive excellence as including high academic expectations of all students, celebrations of academic achievement, faculty buy-in, and institutional commitment. This is really culture change at a whole different level that has changed the way the organization not only sees its relationship with students, but how it sees its relationship with each other. Could you talk some about some of the more challenging aspects of creating inclusive culture? Because when you first started a few minutes ago, I want you to notice the room got a little bit more silent when you started talking about section level analysis and course redesign. But that's the powerful work that has to be done if you're going to actually change the culture. Talk to me a little bit about that.
And if colleagues know we're not there to embarrass anyone, right? And it's not about finger pointing. It's about we can all learn from each other. We have these innovation grants. For my 20th anniversary as president, they raised this amazing amount, $5-6 million for a Hrabowski Innovation Fund. I did not want them to call that because it sounds like I'm dead, right? The but they said they could use it to raise money. So we've got the endowment, and so we give out perhaps 10, 15 of these grants a year for faculty here for about $25,000 for a semester for release time, so they can work on professional development, bringing in people, redesigning courses, use of technology, evaluating what's going on, and it really makes a difference. So we got all these innovation funds every year that are used for that purpose, and there's excitement about that, and others can piggyback on that and it's for interdisciplinarity, and it started in STEM, but it's also in digital humanities, for example, right? You know, and across in imaging and digital arts, a lot of areas. But the key is that it is about the evaluation of what is working to help more students not only remain in the course, but to do well in the course. And it's about giving people who are succeeding a chance to present and talk about the work. And so when I mentioned that TED Talk, high expectations, building community, it takes faculty to bring people into the work, and then there must be rigorous evaluation. Whatever we're doing, can we evaluate it? Can we show that it's making a difference? And that has worked to bring about culture change. Does that mean everybody has changed? No. It doesn't take everybody to change the culture. You get enough people on it that others begin to want to understand what's going on. A tipping point, it makes all. And then when people at a community college or a high school or a family can see my son or daughter can come there and do really well, they want to send the next person, the next brother or sister and others, and then it builds that way.
You know, you talk in your book about the bigotry of low expectations. And I'd love to hear you talk a bit about that, and then more importantly, how you start to counter that. I think that oftentimes when we think about many subgroups of our students, we walk into the door already having a preconception about their potential. Talk to me a little bit about that.
You know, I will tell you, in the first years that I was at UMBC, I asked colleagues and students, who are the highest achieving black students on campus? And everybody said, if you're black and you can earn a C in organic chemistry, the word at that time was you're really heavy. That was the word, deep, heavy, right? Meaning like smart or something, right? And they were very serious. It's very different from what you're hearing at an HBCU, for example, where you're accustomed to somebody getting an A. But when I did the data analysis, I could not find one African American, somebody parents born in this country. I could find some wonderful blacks who had French education, British education, from the islands and other places. They were as good as anybody. They had another set of experiences, and we were very proud of them. But for those with those traditional backgrounds, I couldn't find one who had gotten an A in an upper level science course. And I said to the campus, I cannot find one black who's ever earned an A in genetics. And I had black folks angry at me and white folks angry at me. The black folks said, why would you embarrass us like that? White folks said, why would you embarrass us like that? Now, I'm going to give you a basic principle of leadership. Leadership means keeping everybody minimally dissatisfied. Everybody, all right? Yeah. Everybody, all right? All right? Because they may not be happy with it, but they're feeling I'm being fair. I'm going to say everybody, right? Yeah. And my point as a mathematician was to solve a problem, you have to state it. And I purposely chose that because I wanted to fire people up. It took us 3 years. That third year, we finally got the first A in genetics. I'll never forget, I came in the room, and it was one of the Mile Halls, and we had worked on it to figure out what was it. And some of those kids who got Bs, now I should tell you, went on and got MD, PhDs from University of Pennsylvania and other places. But what's amazing is the first kid to get an A, I came in, I got the grades, we were having a pizza party, and I said to the group, we have our first A in genetics. And all these guys who had gone to science and tech schools in Montgomery County and Prince George's County got up to come get the A. And all of a sudden, I called the name of a young woman from a little country town, from Snow Hill, Maryland, all right? To Keisha, I'll never forget it. And all of a sudden, she started crying. And before, I can never tell the story, everybody cried. Everybody cried with the idea she got an A in genetics. It had been done. From that year on, we have dozens of kids. It was breaking that mental barrier. You get my point? Give that young woman a round of applause. She did it. You know? I should tell you, the women were really empathizing with her. The guys were crying because they didn't get that A. We tend to have the wrong sense sometimes. Go ahead.
So I want to talk about your Meyerhoff program for a minute, because the data is phenomenal and very fascinating. Meyerhoff scholars were 5 times more likely to earn a PhD or MD PhD than students who were admitted to Meyerhoff but went off to other universities instead. They made the choice, and the culture there supported that. So the students who went elsewhere were obviously very talented, certainly had high academic potential, but ultimately they didn't achieve as much. What is it about Meyerhoff that empowers and enables a culture of success for these groups of students?
I would start by saying that the students are in a culture on the campus where colleagues, our faculty, and our staff have seen that it can happen. They know they can do well. And if somebody is in a class, if a student's in a class and is not being as serious, that professor will get to somebody in the program and say, not being serious. There's a problem here, not typical. The best news about that story, though, since that is, that was the case with my house. Now that's the average student. We have other grants for the typical student. We had to first show that high achievers, the highest achievers could do it, because as a country, we had not shown that high achievers, the highest achievers, could go to a predominantly white university and excel. The only place in America it had been shown for blacks and Latinos were in those institutions serving primarily those populations. So fact is that we're the only predominantly white school in the top 10 in producing blacks who are going to get science PhDs. Now my alma mater, Illinois, has gotten in that group. University of Florida is in that group. But Howard is still number one. I will tell you, when the new data come, we're number 2. When the new data come out, we go ahead of Howard University. Would you give me a round of applause? Not that I'm competitive. And I love Howard. And the president there is my mentee. Wayne is wonderful. And Howard, I'm really honored to say the success of the MILE program. Howard has now a MILE program. They have adopted the Bison Scholars Program, and the person leading that program is a UMBC graduate, and the provost at Howard is one of my graduates. So
but you described something I think is really powerful, the idea of a highly networked institution. So if a student is not performing well in a classroom, that means somebody is going to see that student, and then is going to name that student, and be able to connect them to resources. So to me, there is a whole ecosystem that you've had to craft there, instead of that.
A connection between faculty and staff and students, and then alumni come back and work with them. And as I said, so my house are on it, but the next level are also going on the MDs and MD PhDs of all races. The BUILD program at NIH is a perfect example that's modeled for our campus after the MILE program. That's for students who are not your A students. It's a student who's solid B, maybe a few C's. They come in, and we pump them up. We scare them when necessary. We get them understanding. This is another level. You got to be ready to kick butt, academically speaking. You get my point, to let them know we love you so much. But the key is that that effort has worked so well. If you look at one of the most recent issues of Science magazine, there's a piece in it that my colleagues and I wrote on the replication of MILE at Chapel Hill and Penn State. Because for the last 7 or 8 years, Howard Hughes has given us major dollars to replicate for minorities and low-income whites at both those campuses, and the results are phenomenal. They have learned what we've learned, and they're on it. So we've been down, and that was involving faculty. It cannot just be staff. Staff can help, but it is what I say in my TED Talk. It takes scientists to bring scientists into work, in the same way it takes people in the humanities, people in the arts, to pull people into that work and to take ownership of them. So it's going so well right now with Mile Hall that Chen Zuckerberg is funding the replication at Berkeley and San Diego.
Okay, so what would it take for you to replicate that program at an open admissions institution?
I love it.
No.
I appreciate it.
That actually was the next question.
No, I appreciate that. No.
We
would be delighted to work with
we
you.
admit all students, as you know. We are not selective in that. Our students don't live on campus. Many of them have extremely complex lives. And I think if we're to learn from these types of programs, part of that is figuring out how we adapt those programs to meet the student population. And I would love for somebody to make us a test case on that, because I think if any place in the country, seriously, if any place in the country can do it, it would be Montgomery College.
Because you've got some superb students here. Because, the line we use at UMBC, and I really mean that, you do. What I like saying about UMBC is the message we send to the country is you don't have to be rich to be the very best. That gives me goosebumps. You get my point? And I've seen your students, sometimes immigrants, sometimes children of immigrants, sometimes from this country, who come to us, work hard, and excel. So we can do that, and I'd be glad to have that conversation and to work on finding the right place that can help to fund that kind of effort. We know, I say in my speeches all the time, almost half of all people in higher education start in community colleges. So there's that need to do more to show what's, and let me say, my member of the National Academy of Sciences, Mike Summers, who has led this effort, started by getting an AA at community college in Florida. He's a very proud graduate of a community college, then went to University of West Florida, then to Emory. He's now a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He's a Howard Hughes investigator. So he's got that, you know, you see what I'm saying? So there are ways we could work together. We'd love to.
I think that would be outstanding.
Because we want as many of your students as I can get. I have no shame. Let me just say that to you, all right?
I know you always usually have their line. They're the best prepared. You have a little.
I see. I'm in Montgomery because you all got the best prepared paying customers in the state of Maryland. You really do. You really, the largest number of best prepared paying customers, and they're nice. It's good.
So we have one of the things that we're tremendously proud of at Montgomery College is that we have a glorious number of immigrant students who come to us from over 160 countries across this globe. And you write in your book, and we talk about their work ethic. You said, a quote, "For minority students to succeed, we need to instill in them the same kind of values and hunger that you find in the immigrant experience." Can you talk about that?
Sure. You know, many people don't realize that a disproportionately large percentage of the Nobel laureates in America had parents from other countries. They often grew up in New York. At that time, they were often from European countries. They went to the poor man's Harvard, as it was called, City College, or Brooklyn College, and they got the Nobel Prize from the humanities to the sciences. What was the difference? Hunger, intensity. I often say that those of us from the Deep South have that same hunger because we like people from another country, Alabama, look here. And that's not a put down, but it is it's a different experience. We were taught, you must be twice as good, from the Deep South, we know that, and we work so hard. It's that same sense of intensity that it takes that passion to do it, and we see it. I asked my new students this year, freshmen and transfers, I said, if you have a parent from another country, who was born in another country, please stand. Now this is in Baltimore County, right? What percent do you think of my students, new students, transfer students, and freshmen, what percent have at least one parent from another country? What do you think?
Over half.
65%. 60. We're very proud. Give us a round of applause. I'm very proud of that. So for UMBC, you feel that hunger coming, and Kid was saying in a minute, my folks did so much to get me here.
Yes.
I have no choice but to show what I can do. You take those students, and then we are one of the leading partners of the intelligence community. We were the leading producer of talent to NSA. We've got almost 1,200 of our graduates there. And then literally large numbers of retired military families. You get that sense of the values that you feel there, and so there's that intensity for the immigrants and others who have that mission and that purpose. And it helps me with my students because we're also saying we must do as much for the domestic diversity.
Yes.
To show my kid who's from Baltimore City or DC to help him or her and that family see what people from Jamaica and Barbados have done, right? Just being honest about it, and to understand some of the challenges of poor or low-income blacks and whites about being beaten down for generations and needing to say, but we can do this.
Yes.
You know, not blaming anybody, but saying we can do this. Let's see what's possible. So it's that integration of the group that makes a difference.
I will never forget, a few years ago, I had an African student who came to me and suggested, Dr. P, I want you to disaggregate the data between Black and African American students at Montgomery College. And, you know, it's because we use the federal standard, they're all in the same group. And he said, because, he said, I don't come from a colonized mind. That's literally what he said to me. I still remember this to this day. He said, and the experience that I know of most Africans in this country is a very different type of experience than what you would see with those who have been raised in this country, born and raised here. So actually, if you look at the data is very much supportive of what he says in terms of academic achievement, and really challenged me to say you should be thinking about how you report this data. He said because he wanted it to be known that academically I'm well prepared, I work hard, and by the way, I have the outcomes to show that.
Right. And I often say we want to make sure we don't pit one group against another.
Yes.
Very important, right? It's very important, right? That we understand the challenges that each will face.
Yes.
Each faces different challenges, right? And then we want to look at what are those practices and habits of mind that can lead to success.
Yes.
I look at, I will have some students, we have students who are a part of a Caribbean group and then students who are part of a Caribbean American group.
Yeah.
And they're different even. My kids who come directly from Barbados or Jamaica are quite British. Indubitably, right? And they will even say to me about kids who were born and raised in Montgomery County, D.C., don't you think my cousin's a little crude? Wait a minute. Because the kid who's directly from Dallas is going to say, how are you today, sir? Kid from Montgomery County, what's up, Doc? not one worse than the other, just different. Just different. Sometimes the old school approach, though, it does. It's like the old Southerner. You know what? When you're taught that old-fashioned, when you're taught in the military, we need to appreciate the strengths of each and support each, but recognize those behaviors, those actions that lead to success. We tell our students, if you're not ready, that you must be ready to put in 4, 5, 6 hours a day of study, because that's what you see from people from around the world. Whether you're in literature or in biochemistry, you've got to be ready to do that. It is not, and that's why we've gotten away from the word smart. We used to say UMBC is a place to be cool. It's smart to be cool. Now we say the word is grit. Grit. The name of our dog, the Chesapeake Bay Retriever, is True Grit. We say UMBC is the house of grit. The ones we admire the most are those who give it all that resilience, that perseverance, that hard work, and not trying to say, I'm so smart I don't have to study. That's silly. That's silly. It is about focusing on the work, being excited about the ideas, hungry for the knowledge, and willing to help other people. Those are values we talk about a lot.
So audience, I'm going to give you an opportunity to pose questions to Freeman in just a moment. The microphones are in the aisles. You can see them if you'll make your way to it. If you would keep your question brief so we can get through as many of them as we can this evening, because I'm going to ask one more question, and then before we get to them, feel free to start making your way there. In the book, you talk about that there are several factors you believe that hinder performance among minority students. Quote, insufficient preparation, lack of role models, and insufficiently high expectations from faculty. Which of these elements do you believe higher ed has the most control over, and which one do we have the least amount of control over?
Number one, I'm a strong believer in major connections between higher ed institutions and K through 12. We should be understanding what teachers, go give teachers a round of applause for what they do. And so we have many programs focused on building the skills of kids so they can come in, right? You know, and then looking at what's the level of preparation one needs to succeed in a given discipline. You cannot go from a weak pre-cal background and succeed in engineering in 1 year. Not going to happen. What we've got to do is go back to middle school. When I see the probability of a student who starts in remedial development of math at a 2-year or 4-year school getting a college 4-year degree in 6 years is about 15% of that. So middle school math and developmental math are in the same category, pre-algebra and algebra 1.
Yep. So
we need kids who are at least prepared in algebra, right? And if they're thinking about a STEM background, they need to be really strong through the pre-cal at the very least, because well-prepared kids have done A, B, and BC calculus. We know that, right? Now, having written those questions for A, B, and BC calculus, what I would say to you is even students who've done that with 5s still need a lot of help, because they are formulaic. For my math people in the room, you learn how to plug in formulas, and you can do 4 or 5 on AP. In a real college calculus, it takes more. Now, why do I tell you that? I think that preparation is everything, and preparation in STEM is different from general preparation. Overall, I want the kid to be able to read.
Yeah.
If they can read, I can teach them a little stat for the math stuff, and that'll be okay. But that reading and thinking skills and learning what it takes to be disciplined enough to do the work. And I think the more we work with high school and middle school kids, and even down to pre-K, the more we can have a pipeline of kids ready for that, number one. Number two, and most important, is the university or the community college focused on the relationship between expectations and background of the student. If the student is coming in without the general strong background, what will it take to bring him or her up to that? It can be done. I will tell you something. I was at an inner city college before I was at UMBC. I was very proud to work at Coppin as dean and academic VP for years. What I found was this, and it's very different from my UMBC students, the returning students, returning mothers who have kids, who know why they're there, okay? Even if the skills were at a certain level, because of the motivation of there to help my children, they come up. They come up. You know, you can see that every time. You can give them the support while they're trying to work and do that. They'll give you the effort. And with the effort, you can get to the next level. The typical 17 or 18-year-old may or may not have that maturity yet.
Yes.
So you got to, and the boys, we know that males mature at a slower rate than women. We know this. Let's just be honest about it. Why do you think there are co-ed residence halls in America? You know why? Because if you have an all-male dorm, they tear it up. That is the research. I'm very serious. We don't ever want, we're always looking for a few more women. Please send us more women, all right? Men of every race will be stupid if they by themselves, all right? They just, you know, you heard it here first, all right? When the women come, they get more civilized. It's just true. It's a maturity thing.
Ooh, Lord help us.
There are exceptions, but I'm not talking about your individual son. Don't get me later. But from my own experience, my child's experience, no, we need that, right? But I tell you that to say this notion of the relationship between preparation and expectation. And have we used analytics to understand really what that means? And that's the qualitative and quantitative side. And for UMBC, we look a lot at not only the quantitative data, test scores and grades, but we want to understand what's your fire in the belly. For all of us, what's your fire? If you got that fire in the belly, even if your skills are down here, if you're willing to work with me, we can do this. We can do it faster than you think if you're willing to do this. It's so important that we find ways of measuring fire in the belly and attitude. The three most dangerous words I can hear from a student who's transferring it would be these: I got this. If we tell them they need to start at this level, then they say, no, I got this. You know, and the approach we've used has helped. We use students from different community colleges, and especially for the males, because they tend to be the least likely to take the advice so often. We get males who didn't take the advice, who didn't do well, to become the advisors. To say, yeah, I said I got this, and what it means, you got this D. That's what you're going to get.
We'll tell you what you got.
I'll tell you what you're going to get. I said I got this, and I got that D. And they will hear it from them. But that's one of the strategies that has helped us with a lot of students, especially in STEM courses, computer science courses, and those.
All right, I have more, but I'll turn to the audience, and we have someone here.
Hi. Can
Hi.
you hear me? Is this on?
Yes.
My name is Barb LaPalooza. I'm a transfer counselor here at the Germantown campus.
Excellent.
And I have a question that a lot of students ask me about UMBC.
Okay.
And that is, why does UMBC require a foreign language for every major? What is the philosophy behind
Because we
foreign
strongly believe, and I have to tell you, we strongly believe that it is a global community. And we Americans are so monolingual that we want to, you know, I think it's very important. And my commitment to this 2 years ago, I decided to study, I'd read German in college enough to get by, but I decided to study French. And my students said, don't you think you're kind of old, right? And I said, bring it on. So je parle français. Plusieurs étudiants de l'université parlent français couramment. Mes étudiants et moi, nous parlons français chaque jour. J'étudie la finition française, Monsieur Proust, Monsieur Sartre, Madame Simone Beauvoir. Je parle français, mademoiselle. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Point is mindset. We can do this. If an old guy can do it, I know the young students can do it. All right.
Thank you for an incredible talk. I'm really happy to be here tonight. My name is Dr. Darrell Hill, and my question to...
I like this hearing that. Give him a round of applause for that, Dr. Darrell Hill. I like that. And looking at his face, I mean, we have to applaud that. That's what I mean by you have to applaud and recognize it, own it. Go ahead, Dr. Hill.
And since you mentioned that, I want to acknowledge my son here who just graduated from Morehouse and took his... And took his MCAT just 2 weeks ago.
Very
so we're
nice.
waiting to hear back. But my question to you, what does your data and research say about what might be the key ingredients to helping our young people in those earlier grades not get disenfranchised from our educational system?
Sure,
What
it's an
might be
excellent
those
question.
tools?
Excellent question. I want you to look at Lakeland Elementary and UMBC. We have a major experiment going on for the last 7 or 8 years with inner city schools in Baltimore City, where the level of proficiency with Common Core standards is only about 20% in math and reading, coming up to that level. and the average for the state is still only about half, 50%. But and our schools are free lunch schools, 80-90% Latino and Black, few poor white kids. But we are working with those schools every day using our Sherman scholars, who are math and science majors planning to teach in challenging schools, using Meyerhoff scholars and others, and we're doing two things. We're supporting teachers. We're giving them different ways of explaining the same problem, because you can work problems in different ways, and kids learn it in different ways, and the same thing in reading. And we've been able to show with that school and 5 other partnering schools that we've gotten increases every year. And it's been the emphasis on the reading and math, supporting the teachers, bringing families into the school to give them support. And so it's a STEAM approach. We've got Northrop Grumman working with us to bring the arts in, and electronic music, and looking at physics and interesting kinds of ways that arts and science will come together. But most important to me, it has been thinking through how to get these kids to do well enough that they feel good about the performance and want to keep going. And to show them people of different kinds, Black engineers, Latino engineers, women engineers from Northrop Grumman, our students in these disciplines. So the role models, the academic math and reading, mentoring, bringing them to campus, it has to be that holistic approach to support that family and to teach that family, that mother, that grandmother, whoever it is, you can help us with this. So it's that holistic approach that can make the difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Paul, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
And President Hrabowski, welcome to Montgomery College. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, he's the champion of the Black and African American people I've ever seen. All right, so some of the issues about some of the African American people who are, including with the children, live on their property in their homes, because some of the students have some of the health issues about some learning and the environment about
Yes.
the situation. Is that, how can you imagine if you want to make sure that you have all kinds of like the resources for all the students with African Americans? How does that work?
And I always say that African Americans would be one group, the Latino population, children from low-income white families who may have similar challenges depending on the neighborhood. And there are major issues. And all of the NIH research right now in learning will look at this relationship between stress of the environment and the ability to learn, challenges involving lead poisoning, the idea of that boys and girls learn in different ways. And so helping teachers who are working so hard to understand how to have resources to connect, whether it's about needing an additional counselor, whether it's about the amount of time the child needs on task, for example, the large numbers of children who are in these interesting questions about medication and ADHD and autism and all these different issues for children of all types. We are just beginning to understand learning science at a deeper level, to connect science and education, and to give the teachers and counselors the support they need to figure out what's best for the child. The most enlightened approach always involves a group of professionals looking at each child and at that child's progress to determine what's working, what's not working, what else can we do. We have a long way to go with that, but I think the more rigor of analysis we can bring to it, and the more enlightenment about connections between poverty and stress and learning, the better off we'll be.
All right, thank you for your leadership for UMBC. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Britton.
Hi, Dr. Pollard. Hi, Dr. Hrabowski. I am the Early College Program Coordinator for the Germantown campus, and the Early College Program is a program for students who are completing their high school requirements as well as they're receiving an AA in computer science or an AAS in cybersecurity, and 6 of my students are here today. Can you raise your hand? So it's not a question, it's more of a request. If you could just offer them some words of encouragement to stay the track and to stay on course.
Sure, I'd love to. Let me give you just one anecdote. I was at NSA speaking to leaders yesterday. General Nakasani is the head of NSA, and he's an amazing supporter of diversity. And we were talking to a big group of leaders, and one of my students, a young woman, came up and she said, "Doc, I'm finishing my 13th year at NSA." She's 29 years old.
Wow.
This is what's possible. A lot of kids get to work at NSA in high school. They come to UMBC, they work 10 to 20 hours to pay for their education, then they go back. So literally, before she's 30, she'll have almost 14 years And in the same way that people in the military at 7th, you see, so it happens all the time. We were the 2017 Cyber Scholars. We won the national championship in cybersecurity in 2017. Big round of applause. And I'm saying that because I have no shame and I'm trying to recruit these kids right now. I have no shame at all. We are really good, all right? And with the hackathons and everything else. But this is my advice to you. Whether you're in cyber, in math, in biochemistry, I want you to be broadly educated. The most impressive leaders are broadly educated. I want you to appreciate French literature or Chinese literature or philosophy, because the ethical questions we will face when thinking about technology will be more critical than any technical problem we will have. And we don't need robots to handle robots. We need people who understand the distinctions between humanity and the technology, you see? Because we're not about artificial intelligence, we are about humanistic intelligence. And that means, I love it that you're in computer science, I love math, but I do know the humanities are going to be more important than ever as we think about the future of our society. Very good. So keep your passion for the cyber, but I tell you, literature and philosophy or the arts, I mean, our students often will connect disciplines, that's the thing. So we have students who are doing imaging and digital arts, so our technology, our geographic information systems, amazingly, the environment and technology in cyber, for example, health informatics, you can have the technology through threads, and data science with cybersecurity, and data science will be the social sciences coupled with computation and statistics. So interdisciplinarity will be the name of the game for any of you, more than ever. Okay?
So after you complete your high school diploma and after you complete your associate's degree from Montgomery College, UMBC would be the place you should go to finish your bachelor's degree.
And we'll work on that part too, all right? We really will.
We'll go to this side, your professor, yeah.
Hi. There are probably 100 different things we could unpack. I want to focus on something you haven't talked about.
Yes.
When I had an unusual trajectory in my education. 8th grade, I dropped out of school and spent a year in a library. So Voltaire, Asimov, Sagan, that's what I read. And what I found was when I went back to school, I'm not afraid of failing, which is weird because, you do it, you get up, you keep going. And the thing I want to ask you about, because it's the biggest problem I have with students, is that they are concrete, risk-averse, passive, and terrified of being wrong. And I live in Montgomery County. We could live anywhere we want. We chose it because of the schools. My daughter, my son, both were in IB programs, left the IB programs because of the toxic environment, because as you talked about the competitiveness, they're both doing very well in their careers. But the fear of failure, there's no structured environment where students can fail safely. It's the Kobayashi alternative, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so my question to you is, what do you do to get students so that they are not afraid of failing? Because until you get that, you're right. You can do the program, you can do the math, you can do this, you get the 4, and when you get that vaguely worded problem in the real world, you choke.
Let me use some language that I hope you will appreciate. I want broadly educated people who can embrace ambiguity. Whether it is, I am still studying T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. It's so hard, but I refuse simply to look at experts' critiques. So I go back to it, and it was the French poet Apollinaire who said, "Le joie venait toujours après la peine." It means the joy comes after the struggle. That anything worth having. My students say, "Doc, why don't you just say no pain No gain, right? I say, because my way sounds better. Yeah. Whatever. Right? But my point is that we must teach students that which is worth having is not simple usually. Yes, you got to work at it in different ways. Now, the part about failure, I'm going to say something that may be controversial. Some people say, why do you work so hard? I said, on some level, I'm probably afraid to fail. As the first black president in the predominantly white area, I was representing my whole race. I was so worried, because if I didn't, everybody would be saying, told you, right? And that's a part of life, right? But on another level, when we have 100+ companies on campus started by my students and faculty, biotech and IT companies, we got the largest concentration of cyber companies in the country in a research part. It started by students and others, and a part of that is because we do create a climate where it's not the worst thing to fail. That we should have ways in science or in literature when we don't understand, when we don't get it right, that we can learn from that getting knocked down and get back up. I do agree with you on that. But what I would tell you is the sense of community for us involves giving students ways of being able to try, experiment, and have others around them so that when they get knocked down, they can be picked back up and keep going rather than flunking out, for example. You see what I'm saying? So in the science courses, if you go to the video, look at our Chemistry Discovery Center, you got students working in groups of 4, active learning, use of technology. Most important, they have different roles, a project manager, a technologist, a provocateur, and they get something wrong, and then they together in a beginning writing course, rather than just sending it to the professor, they are writing, looking at it, critiquing each other. They get it wrong. People have a chance to discuss what they got wrong. The professor can see from a master computer while she works with one person, but she can see them working to critique each other. When we're critiquing, we're showing how people can be better. So it's getting the tough skin for me that I'm ready. And tough skin and a mindset that says, I can't do this by myself. Anybody we say who does really well on our campus works with other people. And that allows for more freedom and to try and experiment with that, which is, if you look up the company MindStan Technologies, Google it, started by students who are maybe sophomores now, and they are every possible race, men and women who are with a human-centered computing, artificial intelligence company focused on cyberbullying. And they started it because of the bullying they experienced themselves, and sometimes in high school. It's doing so well. Microsoft is a partner of theirs right now. They're on campus in the research part, and they get knocked down and they get right back up. So it's our word grit on the one hand, resilience. In some churches they say we fall down, but we get up. I mean, if we get students to understand, failure is certainly one of the best things that happens in the sense you can learn from it. And number 2, the word with that is resilience. That's what I want people to have. The resilience. Learn. I mean, you can learn from a failure. You learn sometimes more from failure than you do from success. I agree with you. In science, but in life. In life. Anybody in here who's had a big mistake learned from it. Yes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. You get my point? Yeah. So your point is well taken.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Max. Thank you for your talk. As we all know, many factors can affect a child's success in academically, and you talked about how grit and mindset can greatly affect a child's outcome.
Yes.
I've heard that you've been targeting schools and teachers to improve expectations for children, but since most kids spend most of their time outside of school in difficult to reach places like family environments, how do you plan on reaching those environments and helping those kids out?
It's a great question. Give them a round of applause for the question. It's a great question. So my first 2 books with my colleagues were written on parenting and families and community, beating the odds and overcoming the odds. And while the books are 20-some years old, I'm still signing hundreds of those books all the time and working with parents to look at roles they can play and community groups. But perhaps our signature program is if you look up the UMBC Choice Program, we supervise 500 children, heavily boys of color, some poor white kids, some girls from gangs who are first-time offenders, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we've been doing it since 1989. We've served about 10,000 families, and we look at what you can do to help children who sometimes have not been taught the importance of brushing their teeth in the morning, of taking a shower, okay? And what we see, what my students see, and we have professionals who work with them. We've got returning Peace Corps workers working with them. And these are out of inner city Baltimore heavily, but we've had it down in Prince George's County, and we with the Department of Juvenile Services. What we see is enormous talent, amazing talent. And what they need is that the mentoring, the coaching, the support, the example, the role model, the opportunity to read enough to get good at it. And then they bring that depth of experience. I will tell you, some of the best math thinking I've seen among little middle school kids have been children who sold drugs. Mm-hmm. Their level of maturity, their understanding of weight, of word problems, of reflecting, it's unbelievable. The question is, how do you take that and make it something positive? We need all of us helping those children, and we need public policies that will work on the public policies that will change how we treat those children, rather than putting them in an institution but giving them the support they need. It's a great question.
I have one more. You talked about helping out like thousands of families.
Yes.
That's a lot. That's a big number. But if you look nationally, there are many more people that need help. So
that's why I said the bigger issue. You're right on target.
Policy.
Public policy, man. The way you help millions is to shape public policy. I have the privilege of chairing the Marguerite Casey Foundation in Seattle. And we work with those 5 states first who have almost half of all poor children. 40-some% of all poor children live in 5 states. What states do you think they are?
California, Texas.
You just get 2 sets of answers. Some people will say the Deep South, but they have the concentrated poverty. But the 5 states are New York,
California.
Illinois, California, Texas, and Florida.
Yep.
The biggest states. They got almost half of all poor children, almost half of all rich children. They're a microcosm of the country, right? So we've been working on, and this is why I can say it so comfortably, on public policies that will shape millions of people. One perfect example, we've worked with California. California has now put in place laws that will expunge the felonies from all those young men of color who made a mistake when they're 19, who are doomed for life if you don't do something about it. I mean, that's a major, and our hope is that usually as it happens in California,
So goes the nation.
other states begin to look at it. So your point is a very good one. We're working and learning some things, but it is through public policies, through changing legislation, just as we changed the civil rights legislation involving women, involving higher education, that you affect millions of people. It's a great question.
thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Professor of Engineering. I love this conversation, but I'm dismayed to hear the pipeline metaphor.
Okay.
With the pipeline, if you leak out, you can't get back in, and if you're never in the pipeline, you don't even get pre-calculus.
Right.
I wrote a paper about this, and it was
Yes.
very upsetting to see how the pipeline works against us. Do you have a better metaphor that we can coin so that people will stop talking about these pipelines?
We're not, people have been saying that for decades. It is what it is. And I would say that I appreciate what you're saying, the metaphor. The sad part is that whether we want to accept it or not, if you get a 19-year-old and that child still, that young man or woman still doesn't know basic pre-algebra, it's not that they couldn't learn enough to get to engineering, but the gap between where they are and what they will need to get it online to move towards engineering is so vast. And colleges don't have enough money to give them the years of support that they need. I compare performance in math, because I always go, math is at the base. I like to say engineering is applied math and physics, quite frankly. But the fact is that I compare the math to language. If you don't get those fundamentals in languages, you can't go to the next level. I play classical piano. If you don't get the fundamentals in music, you cannot go to the next level. And while idealistically I agree with you, it is the reality that unless we can find a way to get many more, whether we use pipeline words or not, I appreciate that. I've heard the argument for decades. Unless we can do much more with those children in middle school to get them with a solid algebra and reading and word problem background, it is really hard, not impossible, but really hard to get them as freshmen and they're still in Algebra 1 or 2. And what I see right now in our sense of a lack of realism is literally hundreds of thousands of students who are saying they're going to go into engineering and they're starting with remedial math. And when we look at the analytics of it, it doesn't happen. And so I think we have to be realistic. There are 2 or 3 things I would say. We need more engineers, yes. We need the report that I did with the colleagues from the National Academy says we've got plenty of students who have the calculus and they don't make it. We have to start there. I mean, most of the people who take calculus, who get 650, 700 math SAT, who start in math and science and engineering, get wiped out. So that's like low-hanging fruit. That's about changing the culture at our institutions to help more of those students. Secondly, I am a strong believer that we in this country have a cookie-cutter approach. We think every student needs to get a 4-year degree. That's just not true. It is not, and it's not that I'm being elitist. I see so many programs of 2-year programs that can lead to great jobs. Doesn't mean the student may not later on go on and get a 4-year degree, but we need to help people get the skills they need to get a job. And so many students are so bored that they're not going to sit in a basic liberal arts program. I hear this all the time, and Jobs for the Future is the program I look to. I've seen what they've done to map programs at community colleges to real jobs, because when I'm working with people for auto mechanics, what people don't know is they still got to be able to read well. They still got to have some basic technology, some algebra. You know, I see that, and the reason so often they don't make it, they can't get past remedial math. So what I'm saying is, idealistically, I don't disagree with you. But the reality of what I see is we have to get more of them to get through that algebra and pre-calculus if we expect them to go and get those degrees in engineering, 2 or 4 year, while we work to change the culture of our teaching and learning. So even those students who are doing okay in the pre-cal and cal can make it, because they're not making it right now. We're under 5% of the college degrees are in STEM right now. So we've got layers of problems. Yours is a bigger problem that I don't disagree with, but we got some other problems to solve before we can get to yours. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you, though, very much. Thank you very much.
Hi, Steve.
Yes.
Dr. Hrabowski, good to see you.
Yes.
So I'm here from the universities at Shady Grove tonight,
And let me applaud. Let me just say, I was planning to get to that. We are so proud of our partnership with Shady Grove involving Montgomery College and Shady Grove, well-prepared students in a lot of majors, from social work to psychology to history, but now starting this fall with a bachelor's in computer science.
How about that?
I'm really proud. And the work in biotechnology. We got those students, and the program this year when the students from Montgomery College is full with the biotech. Give the college a round of applause. Montgomery College. I'm very proud.
you just kind of did it. I was going to ask you, you're such a great recruiter for the home campus, but I was going to ask you with the new biomedical science and engineering building here, give a pitch to the students and those that are watching on television about why, especially why you bring the programs to Montgomery County.
Exactly. We bring the programs here because you've got great industry here, great talent here, wonderful Montgomery College here. And what we have seen, and the president and I have worked on this, is that we can have that whether we call it pipeline or just a group of students, and I'll even stop using the word pipeline, though I've heard your argument for years, but a group of students, I appreciate your caring so much, but a group of students who have done well here in the sciences. And we have an amazing associate dean responsible for this campus, who's African-American woman named Dr. Anika Wayman, who she's an amazing, I recruited her when she was in Western Pennsylvania, and she was 17, she was president of student government at a school that was 99% white. And she was an A student. And on the spot, I gave her a scholarship to UMBC. And I said, if you come to us, we'll make you a PhD. She and her husband are now PhDs in bioengineering from Georgia Tech. Give them rounds of applause. All right. And she's the associate dean, and she's a dynamo. Yeah. She looks like a student still, but she is working with the biotech industry, working with Montgomery College, right? And we want to do anything we can do to help with that program. We want to do it because it is a model for the country. It is. It really is. So in biotech, to the computing area, to the social sciences, no, we are strong believers in Shady Grove. We have put a flag there, and we want to be the best there. Okay. All right. And you can tell the other sister campuses I said that too. We are owning it.
I think they probably heard you by now.
Oh, no. We love all of them. We are owning Shady Grove, UMBC.
All right, so we're going to do the popcorn round here because we've got about 5 more minutes left, and I'm going to. We've got 3 guests left. So I'll go to this side.
Hi, my name is Colby Cisco. I'm a high school student at Quince Orchard High School and a dual enrollment with Montgomery College.
Very nice.
And my question is, we talk a lot about the achievement gap and why it's so broad, and when you come down to it, it's mainly because the opportunities that minority students are not given compared to non-minority students. How can we do that? How can we bridge that gap in our high schools?
Two things. Because we see students in the same high school, and unfortunately, we see a gap there, even in the same high school. It is that background, the support that they need. I'm going to go back to something I said before. I can't say it enough. Reading skills. We learn to read by reading, and we need more and more emphasis. If you give me that child who's reading novels, I can teach her to solve that word problem. I've written the questions for the math SAT. They are word problems, a little geometry, but they're word problems, right? Yeah. So if you don't like them, you can throw eggs at me, all right? But I'm telling you, if you can get that child to read more and to be excited about reading and turn that TV off and those video games off, give me a round of applause for that. All right? And we want to tell families that if you want your child to excel, focus on the books, and then software that's about learning with the computing, but focus on the reading and then word problems. And then the final point is this. Giving families the support to know how important hard work is. Mm-hmm. This is where the typical immigrant family has an advantage. There's been such hunger to get here that they know you got to work really hard to do it. And nothing takes the place of hard work. I cannot tell you that enough. I mean, we learned that in the Deep South. People learn it all over the world. The people who do the best have a passion for the work. I want that passion in every child. Okay? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Pollard, for bringing him here. I am a stalker of yours, and I have heard you speak 8 times.
Oh, my God.
And so, for a number of years. Thank you. My name is Fizi Halim. I am the Business Solutions Manager here at Montgomery College for Workforce Development and Continuing Education. Part of my question is really self-serving because I do believe that you are, in some cases, one of our biggest competitors because you recruit people so well and you sell your programs so effectively that I'm envious and I'd like to adapt and adopt to most of what you have achieved. But to having said that, how do you feel, because I heard you at the Governor's Summit last week.
Yes.
And so one of the things I was interested in was learning more about how you feel about the current structure of the apprenticeship program, because I agree not everyone has to go through a rigorous degreed program, but they may need formal education and training on the job in certain skills. Companies need to understand how to work with those programs more effectively. And the speaker that we heard last week told us that she was not appreciative of the way the structure was currently in a registered program. How would you change that, and how can we get more companies to accept the apprenticeship program as well?
You know, let me say that we have the first apprenticeship program approved by the state for cybersecurity at our company. And it's not for credit. It's a non-credit program, but we have a partnership with the National Security Agency. So we've got thousands of people who are former veterans, who are with an English degree, okay, who come through these apprenticeship programs for 12 to 18 months, and they get great jobs. They get great jobs, you know. And we're always wanting to partner with people. These are people typically between Baltimore and Howard County, okay? But we are always looking at ways of partnering to see how we can work together, because I would want UMBC and Montgomery College to be the best partners ever. There are enough people we can share. And I want this region to hear me saying, I don't know any students better prepared than students who come out of Montgomery College. Okay? That's the truth. And I will tell students in a heartbeat, stay and get that degree.
Thank you.
Because that makes all the difference. So get that A.
Yes.
And then it makes a difference, right? And then for those who want to go on, some can get great jobs then, others will go into to UMBC or wherever. But the other part is the apprenticeship programs. I think we can learn from each other. You know, and that's what people had to convince me, because for years I was saying everybody should get a college degree. But the fact is everybody didn't want to get a college degree. And the worst thing is to have somebody in school for 4 years or 5 years bored, going through the motion, and not appreciating the work. You know what I mean? I'd rather see them go through an apprenticeship program or AA first, get a job, and then have a lust for learning when they're older, and then study history or whatever. You get my point? So different levels for different people, without criticizing somebody for not just moving straight through. I think it's really important. We should be working together. I'm here to say UMBC wants to work with Montgomery College for sure. All right? All right. Shady
Last
Grove,
question.
Montgomery, we love it. Yeah.
We love it. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Juanita Cole. I'm an ACE Fellow this year. My home institution is the National Defense University, and I'm being hosted by University of Maryland College Park.
Yep. Give a round of applause for all of that.
So, you talked a lot about role models and how many students need to see themselves in the roles of professors and even out in the industry.
Sure.
So I want you to talk a little bit more about what you're doing at UMBC in particular to try to broaden that pipeline, to have more faculty members, staff, and even senior leaders in those roles.
Sure. Two or three things very quickly. If you look at the NSF Advanced Program, it's designed to get more women in the STEM areas. And we have increased substantially the number of women faculty who are both in administrative jobs, and that based on building community, the same thing, identifying people for women, and then we have a STRIDE program, STRIDE, to bring in more faculty of color. And we look at postdoctoral students of color, bring them in, give them 2 years to do research with people, and when things work out, we move them into faculty positions. And so now I would tell you 40% of the people we're bringing in are people of color. Give us a big round of applause for the faculty. You know, we got a long way to go, but we are, it's that model of bringing them in as postdocs, teaching fellows, give them a chance to show, give them a mentor. And I want to make this distinction between a mentor and a coach as the final point. The mentor is wonderful and gives support and is more reactive. The coach or the advocate or the champion will knock down doors for that person. A sponsor, right? We need more people in the professoriate becoming sponsors for young people of color and women who would say, you can do this, and push it down.
So I know that you clearly understand why he was our opening speaker for this week. I really want to thank you, Freeman, for always being a wonderful champion, sponsor, mentor, and friend. I also want to thank our students and faculty and staff and our communities who came out today to be a part of this dialogue. I know for a fact it was well received and very engaged by the college community. I'd like to thank MCTV, our special events team, and where is the Dr. Megan Gibbons, our incomparable Megan Gibbons, who puts all of these things together. Bethesda Magazine, who is our media sponsor. I had several people said, I'm here tonight because y'all had good media, so I want to thank Bethesda for that. And then the Meyer Foundation, who is phenomenal in supporting the series, particularly helping us to push the books to our students and to the college community. We're very grateful for that. And last but not least, I'm hopeful that you all will continue to be supportive this year. On October 29th at the Rockville campus, we'll be hosting Dr. Neil Nakadati, who's actually a professor of mine at Iowa State University, who will be talking about several books he's written about the Japanese-American experience in this country, particularly around internment and what that has meant for he and his family. So I am delighted to be able to host him as we think about mentors who then become colleagues and who also help change your life in so many ways. So thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, yeah! Safe travels and good night.